in a minute, we'll say. Okay. So, happy, good afternoon, everyone. I guess it's noon now. Morning's over, we're into the afternoon. Jim Holway here, your candidate for Corporation Commission, together with my friend Terry Goddard, who's our candidate for Secretary of State and former Attorney General for Arizona. So as you know, we've been doing these live internet town halls all day as a way to reach out directly to the voters, because that's what campaigns are supposed to be about. Talking about the issues, talking to you, the voters, giving you a chance to meet the candidate. So that's why we're out here doing this. And our topic for this top of the hour for 10, or maybe we'll go for 15 or 20 minutes if there's enough interest from folks, is to talk about dark money. Talk about two things. What is its impact, and why are we concerned about its impact on elected officials and elected offices? And then second, Terry and I will both talk a bit about what we think some of the solutions are. So let me go ahead and pitch things, Terry, over to you and share a bit about what you see as the biggest concerns.
Well, Jim, as you know, and you can see on the sign behind me, I've been adamant that dark money is one of the most serious problems facing Arizona today, facing the country, but we seem to be in the 0 hour, in the target area in Arizona for dark money. And we should say what that is. Dark money is largely corporate cash that wants to hide who's really paying for political advertisements. So they set up these front organizations, usually 501c4 nonprofits, who exist solely for the purpose of laundering political cash. And I say laundering advisedly. I've been a criminal prosecutor for most of my legal career. And in the last 8 years as your Attorney General, I went after the money launderers who move cash for the cartels, some of the most serious criminals in the world. And what I see in the money laundering area is exactly, in the dark money area is exactly the same kind of money laundering activity. And I'm anxious to be Secretary of State to go after those players because they're corrupting our political system. They're reducing people's confidence in our democratic voting. And I just believe passionately that has to be stopped, just like the sign behind me says.
Well, Terry, and I appreciate that quick overview and introduction to the issue. And the particular concern I have with the commission, so my race for the Corporation Commission, at this point, we have had about $3.5 million in secret funds come into this, or let's say $3.5 million funds. You know, to be fair, the solar industry put about $500,000 into the primary battle, but everybody knew where that was coming from. We knew it came from the solar industry. In the primary, somebody put in another $1.7 million. And now in the general election, primarily against my opponent, fellow Democrat Sandra Kennedy, they put in $1.3 million. And the common assumption here is that this is Arizona Public Service that's doing it in an effort to intentionally, I don't know what else to call this other than an effort to buy the election. My concern is our commission was created to be independent of the governor, to be independent of the legislature. It really is a fourth branch of government in Arizona. It clearly was intended to be independent from the utilities that it regulates. So to have a utility sort of step out of normal practice, which is to stay out of this election, and put in enough money to buy it, I think is a grave concern. And it's something that the commission can do something about, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but my concern at the moment is they refuse to do it. That in itself, I think, is proof of the intimidating factor that this kind of money makes on a political process, and basically does, I think, destroy the independence and integrity of the commission. But Terry, I know you held a press conference Monday, and you talked about a legislative solution you think can solve it.
Well, let me just make the point, Jim, and you do it very well, that whether APS is involved in paying for the Corporation Commission ads that we see attacking you and Senator Kennedy, and in the primary attacking Parker and Mason, is almost beside the point. You've got one issue which is saying that the regulated utility should not dominate the organization that regulates them. I think that's a fundamental premise in the economy and the business of Arizona. Ratepayers won't stand for it. That may be why they're using a dark money cover, so that if they're involved, their involvement will not be known. Because I'm sure that if somebody put a sign up and said, well, I'm running for the Corporation Commission, I'm supported by APS, the voters would immediately do this.
Right.
There's no question. So they're trying to stay secret, and they have the potential in Arizona, because our legislature has been so asleep at the switch. They have just not taken action to stop this abomination. And therefore, we're the Cayman Islands of dark money. We're the place that people go to vacation if they're dark money operatives.
Sure.
And that's wrong, and we've got to change it. We've got to bring transparency. And that's what I did beginning of this week, I rolled out a legislative proposal. I've had a plan on my website, terrygoddard.com. I hope folks will take a look at it. That plan's been there for months, but I turned it into a bill form, or close to a bill form. Bills are works of art, and they need a lot of massaging. But I had 13 legislators sign on Monday of this week, and 3 or 4 more have joined since then. So we've got an emerging group of folks in the Arizona legislature, or soon to be serving in the Arizona legislature, who believe transparency should be the order of the day, that dark money has to be stopped.
Right.
And let me say very clearly that this is a bipartisan effort. All the legislatures supporting me so far, because we're so close to the election, happen to be Democrats. But I've talked to Republicans, and they are just as concerned. This should not be a Democrat or Republican issue. It should be absolutely bipartisan, because everybody gets savaged, and it's our election system, it's our democracy that's being tarnished by dark money.
Absolutely. And for folks who are listening, there's a couple ways you can jump into this conversation. One is you're sitting there in YouTube and you have a chat function, and you see we've got the screen behind, that's what you see, and you can put a question in through chat. The other you can do, we have our very fancy and developed call-in number here that you can call. So the call-in number.
We went through a lot of trouble.
We worked really hard to get this sign together. You know, we just didn't have enough secret funding to afford a big sign. So
little dark money would have fixed that. It would have really flashy bill.
It could be neon, yeah. So 253-4729, and if you call in, we'll take your call. In addition, that I want to add here, Terry, in terms of some of the specific things the Corporation Commission can do, and clearly the Commission, at least to my knowledge, doesn't have the authority to stop this kind of money flowing, but they do have the authority to require transparency. If you are a public utility, you are regulated by the Corporation Commission, and the Commission could issue an order that says all utilities we regulate, we will require you to report your funding of the elections. At a minimum, be required for the election of the Corporation Commissioners. These are the individuals who regulate the utilities. If utilities are going to play in that election, as I think Terry said, we have the right to pull back the veil of secrecy.
Well, absolutely, we should. I mean, this is about transparency. This is about knowing who it is that's urging us to vote in a particular way, and all voters in Arizona to vote in a particular way.
Right.
And I think it's very seriously deficient of the current commissioners, given the fact that over $3 million has been spent in the Corporation Commission election, not to have already demanded what you're talking about. They have the power to do it. They know the money's being spent. And so far, the major utility, APS, has been ambiguous. They simply said, we don't have to tell you.
Right.
So we're not going to tell you.
Right.
And you draw your own conclusions. And I think the commission owes us as voters and as ratepayers. I'm a ratepayer in the APS district. And if my money is going to buy dark money ads, my rate money, my electric utility money, I want to stop that.
Right. Absolutely. And what to me is troubling is the Commission could stop it, and they have chosen not to. And the one thing I did learn in the course of the campaign is this doesn't even require a majority of the 5 commissioners. We don't need 3 commissioners. Individual commissioners have subpoena power. So I have committed that one of my first acts as an elected official to the Commission and representing you will be to require this to be reported. Now, my first effort will be, I would love to get a unanimous vote of all 5 commissioners, and that would be there. I want to build a partnership. But if I can't get that, I will individually issue the subpoena, and we will know.
Well, and let me take that one step further, because I think this is so important. And I hear campaigning across Arizona, people all the time saying 2 things. One, we got to stop dark money. We got to stop the anonymous corporate cash. And second, I don't have confidence in an election system where I don't know who's arguing for or against a particular candidate. I don't understand whether this is a group that I am supportive of or one that I deplore. And so they want that to be changed so that they know that their votes have reason, have substance, and that they fully researched what it is that they're voting for or against. So I think it's critically important to have transparency. That's what I hear. And just as you want to even have one person to vote on the commission to bring transparency, I'm committed, even if the legislature does not do the right thing and pass the bill that I have proposed and written out. And by the way, you can find it on my website, terrygoddard.com. I'm going to go to the citizens of Arizona with an initiative proposition, a citizens initiative, if the legislature will act, because I think this has to be done, and it has to be done now.
I think it's important. Well, Terry, we have had a couple of questions come in, so let me John from Tempe has asked, what do you have to say to independents who are widely ignored in Arizona? And this is a subject you've talked about.
First, I'm sorry. The last 20 years of secretaries of state and the last actions by the Arizona legislature have made independents more and more marginalized in Arizona, and that's wrong. Everybody, whether they have an R, an I, or a D after their name, I believe deserves absolutely equal rights. But if you're an independent and you want to vote by mail in the primary, you got to ask special permission every election to get your ballot. That's wrong. You should get it automatically, just like Republicans and Democrats do. And if you want to change the party's ballot that you're getting, you can notify people. But otherwise, it'll come in the mail. You don't have to make a special request, which all too often, unfortunately, gets missed in the mail that comes beside besieging so many voters' houses. The second thing is, right now, if you want to run for statewide office and independent, you need 33,000 signatures. If you want to run as a Democrat or Republican, you need about 7,000 signatures. What an amazing unfairness in our system. That's got to be changed, and I'm committed to changing. So there are a whole series of obstacles that we're trying to. The legislature and my opponent in this race was the head of the Senate Elections Committee. They simply look the other way, in spite of the fact that independents are being treated so badly.
Terry, I think it clearly an important issue at this point is I think most people realize we actually have more registered independents or other party in Arizona than we do Republicans or Democrats. And I think it's critical that we find a way to engage that electorate, those voters, and get them involved in the process.
But nonetheless, we have a mess of an election system. I think
we do
agree, and it has been calculated and created, not by accident, but by design.
To make it hard.
To make it harder, yeah. Because independents have basically said we don't want to play your political party game.
Right.
We want to be able to vote as responsible citizens, but we don't want to have to be an R or a D. And the R's, who basically have been controlling the show, said, well, that means we don't want you to play.
Right. We
don't want somebody with independent mind changing our results.
Right. So, Terry, we've got two other questions here, which I think we've touched on some, but this may bring out a few more comments that you've got. So Lisa has put a question on Facebook, and she's asked, how can the two of us stop dark money together, which I think we've talked a bit about, maybe some other thoughts. And then Marion from Sun Lakes asks, how can we as voters stop dark money from controlling elections?
Okay, I got a couple of ideas. We've already talked about you getting demanding an audit of all public records. That doesn't get to the ones that are offshore, the ones that are outside of Arizona. But it would go a long way, it seems to me, to diffusing voters' insecurity about whether or not the major public utility in Arizona is really the one trying to move their vote one way or the other. So I think, Jim, what you can do at the commission is very important and critically important. What voters can do, frankly, is look very carefully. Information is the key. And one of the things I'm very, very excited about perhaps getting in as an interim step before we have full-fledged transparency is simply to require dark money operations to put a little disclaimer on their ads right after it says not paid for by any candidate or candidate's organization. I believe there ought to be a couple more words. Would not provide the identity of, refuse to provide the identity of their contributors. And that's what the definition of dark money. And I think if the ad has that right at the end, I think many voters can look at it and say, nope, that's not somebody we want to be for. Whoever they're for, I'm against. And frankly, I hear that more and more. Lori Roberts of the Republic just did a very perceptive column about dark money up to date. Over $15 million, according to her count and other expertise, has been spent in the Arizona elections. That's $15 million. You spoke about $3 million in the Corporation Commission race, and that's appalling. That's the worst thing I've ever heard about. But when you multiply that across other races in Arizona, $15 million is the number that's now been disclosed, and we haven't gotten to the end of the election. So these folks are serious. They mean to control how we vote. And if left unattended, if we continue to have Arizona operating as the Cayman Islands for dark money, as the free zone for anybody who wants to hide their contributors, they're going to control who takes office in Arizona in the future, and we can't let that happen.
Well, Terry, I want to thank you for joining us here, and we'd like to continue this conversation. So clearly, you can go to Terry's Facebook page. Please. You can go to my Facebook page where there's a post up. We can continue this conversation. As Terry mentioned, his website includes his legislative proposal, so you can take a look at that. And I believe I've somewhere got up the letters that I previously sent to the commission, urging them and pointing out
You've been a vigorous correspondent.
giving them their authority.
And I want to thank you for breaking through this new area, at least new to me, of communications with Arizona citizens. I think it's very exciting.
Absolutely. I think this has enormous potential to help us get out there. And we will continue to do these through the day, top of every hour for 10 minutes. I'm looking forward to our 2 o'clock one. Is one in particular. We'll have David Garcia, Superintendent of Public Instruction candidate. And partly what we want to talk about is how do we educate our youth today to make them effective citizens and help them take back the power of government when it's their turn to vote.
And David and I have been working on a plan to make sure that every child, when they reach 18, has the option of registering. Because right now, I think that's the last thing on their mind. But the schools could help us make it clear that this is one of your obligations as a citizen.
And Terry, let me make a brief point there, because I think this gets to the core role of your office, the Secretary of State that you're running for. And I think what I really like about your campaign, what I look forward to you as our Secretary of State, is the central purpose of this office should be how do we empower as many people as we can to exercise their right to vote. Exactly. Not how do we find new ways to restrict it, but how do we expand that power and make sure that we're engaging all our citizens.
That would be a 180-degree turnaround
would be
for the Arizona Secretary of State's office, and I'm anxious for the chance to turn the ship.
So folks, join us in future ones. Continue to engage with us in other means by Facebook and our websites. And Terry, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you everyone for joining us.